Hi, welcome to this is an episode of Prophecy for the Last Hour. My name is Liz McGee, and I'm your host. So I wanted to, share, impart, teach, whatever, some things that have been on my heart that I've been studying. And it is, to me now, it's really become true. The more you study, the more you realize you don't know. I mean, it's like, I don't know. Sometimes I just throw my hands up and go, oh, Lord, I really don't know. But I'm going to give it my best shot. So there is a whole big debate, one of the hot potatoes items out there today, like there's not enough of them. But one of them is Paul, our wonderful apostle Paul, St. Paul. What's up with him? All right, there is a whole new, as an army, I believe, an army of researchers who are researching everything. There's no stone that people really aren't looking under again. No text, because they're all coming up, out of the earth. They're all coming back to us, that people are not reading and discerning and trying to piece together a holistic understanding of the gospel, the Torah, the times we live in, the times we're going into, the whole. So there is a lot of new information about Paul. There's a lot of revisiting. There's a lot of information. And it is pretty crazy, some of it, I have to admit. The problem is, most people just want to stay with what they're taught kind of in a box, and it's okay. I don't want to rag on people who don't want to go deeper and get bigger answers that kind of cover all the questions. It is sort of a calling, and you have to, you got to love what you do. You wouldn't do it if you didn't love it. But there is a certain amount of being Berean, I think, that the Lord makes clear that we all do need to do. Actually, the highest form of worship before the Lord is actually Torah study. That really is true. He exalted his word above everything. And so he does expect us, he does want us to draw near and to get deep into these subject matters. But what a digression. Anyways, Paul. So there's a lot. Should I just come out and say it? I don't know. All right, this is what I want to say. There's a couple of questions when you get to Paul, because there's a lot of information that is coming forward. There are a lot of people that are looking deeply into historical documents again. We have a lot of documents that will give us some real history, nail people, players, times, and places down much more accurately and kind of fill out the picture. There is, again, there's a lot of text coming out that give different nuances and almost different storylines to some of these things. And when you're going to be a researcher, you have to, in my opinion, not be afraid and just read them all. Ask for discernment. Keep your heart pure and hope for the best. I don't know what to say. Anyways, when you get into the whole Paul debate, and I guess what I'm trying to say is did Paul really preach another gospel, the real gospel? Was he a departure? Was he a false apostle? Was he possibly the spouter of lies? Was he, now notice he's not the wicked priest. See, when you get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's all these names for people or titles for people, but they don't really plug in the real name. They're like, Paul is the lying spouter. You have to kind of come at it with, well, there's a lot of clues this way. There's some things, evidences here. The teacher of righteousness. There's a lot, but maybe God is allowing all this on purpose, because this is really making us digging in deeper. But when you get into this whole area, there's a lot of bigger issues that have to be understood. Like, okay, with Paul, what is the law? And it's the whole argument. Is Paul teaching that we are, we really did throw the law out, the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and we don't have to keep the law? Did he really say that? Is grace like this kind of salve you can put on, that if you sin, it just absolves you from all guilt or consequence? So, and who are the Gentiles? What really is grace? All these different questions. And when you study deeply, what is the relationship of the players, James the Just and Paul? Or, who is Simon Max? I'm just throwing these out. These are some of the big questions that people are trying to piece together. But I just want to start here with, because there's some huge, and I don't know if I can even do this in a soundbite an hour, try to throw in some of, kind of weave together all right, this is my understanding to date. Okay. But and two big questions. You have to say, what is the law? What is grace? Who are the Gentiles, first of all? And then what is this whole concept of, what is the circumcision of our heart? This new thing that Paul says, the believer can have, where he doesn't need, he has this circumcision of the heart. What is that all about? But what I want to say is, I do think that Paul is, just like he says he was, I think he is the apostle to the Gentiles. This is, some of this stuff can be really simple when you understand some of the timeline, because God is holy, his word is holy, but you know what? Time is also very holy. This is one of the things, that's why the calendar is such a big deal today. It's another hot potato. People are trying to figure out. That's why the times and the seasons, the Moedims, these things are very important Hebraic concepts, because these things have an element of the holiness of God to them. All right. So we are not supposed to be flippant. We are supposed to try to figure these things out. And what I want to propose basically is, no, Paul was pretty radical. Oh, he was very radical. I think it was a radical in his birth of Yah. I think he was knocked off to the horse. I think he actually did have an absolute in-your-face conversation with Yeshua in the light, a face-to-face kind of thing. And I think it changed him forever. Now, when he was all said and done figuring out his calling, kind of checking the scriptures, yeah, it was pretty radical. And I think we're still reeling from this. I don't think whole portions of the church ever stopped reeling from the implications. But this it's a pretty messy business. Poor, yeah, when he's dealing with us poor vessels down here, very imperfect, where we are wired, with these two angels, we have an inclination, an evil inclination, and when this desire to do holiness, yes, it does get messy. What can I say? But, all right, back to Paul. Okay, and this really ties into some other really big things today. Because, all right, this is my first supposition. I think that the only way to understand Paul is to understand where we are today. And this is at the end of the age. We are done 6,000 years. And I believe in, again, holy time. This thing has and always has had a beginning, an end, and a middle. The salvation history of mankind, from whatever happened in the garden to our full restoration, the elect, those, all Israel, whoever, back up to our first estate, to being in our clothed with our heavenly nature again, in holy and face-to-face, no more veils, no more relationship with our Creator Father. So that being said, 7 is a big cycle, but 7 is a huge cycle. We are at the end of the 6,000 days. They, at the time of Yeshua, that was also a very pivotal time. That was the 4th day. And yes, that was the 4th day. We've done 2 more days, so to speak, 2 more 1,000 years, and we technically have 1 more 1,000 years to go, a millennial reign, okay? So time has to be factored in to all of the understanding of prophecy. That is why John the Baptist and the Essenes, this is the whole concept of the Essene community, the sons of Zadok, going out into the wilderness and preparing a people and a safe zone for the Messiah to come, because they knew prophetically, this is one of the jobs of the priest, was to understand time, the cycles, as in heaven, as above, so below, to understand the cycles, and to practice, to work in alignment and in harmony with the cycles, okay, the heavenly time frame. So this is, and again, huge, I can't even go into it, but this is sort of an understanding I have. So time is important. So we are at what is called, scripturally would be called at the restoration of all things. This is one of the things Enoch promised, that there would be a last days generation, and in that generation, everything would come into the light. There would be a time of transition, that the time of Belial will end, the time of the wicked. There's a lot of phrases for this, and that the elect would inherit the earth, and we would have a millennial reign of peace, and where like the rose blooming in the dead. These things are where the way everything can be in beautiful harmony, which will produce the greatest all kinds of fruit. So in every category. So a utopia on earth. Okay, that's sort of where we're going, and we're at the cusp of this. Can happen. We're the last generation. So a lot of people keeping track of that time in so many ways. We got a ton of people out there talking about, I think it's September 23rd or something this month. I mean, I'm not going there. I'm just saying time is a factor. So if we're at the end of the age, it would make perfect sense to me that the concept of Paul and that the time to revisit our early foundations, the time of when Yeshua first came, and the players on the scene, so to speak, and the forward movement of that hugest that's probably one of, I don't know, I shouldn't put a number on it, but the fact that the Messiah, the Son of Man, did come, was anticipated to come by a people group. They made themselves ready. He came, he fulfilled his ministry, and boom, we went into a new phase of this thing, the last 2 days, which is called the days of the Messiah. One thing about the Jews is they have broken down this 6,000 years, and they have an understanding of the ages, and they've just very broadly, and I've taught on this, explained these, it's 2, 2, and 2, the first 2,000 years of chaos. That's a whole huge age people are unpacking today. We're beginning to understand in Genesis 6 and the incursions into the angelic incursions into the genetics of mankind and the ramifications of that and the flood, that everything that was going on in the time of chaos. Okay. Then you go into the second 2,000 years. Like I said, I have whole teachings on this, but just the time of the law, the time of the Torah, we had where there was a nation, there was a whole formidable nation, the most prominent nation under David in the world, and actually believe in the history of all the kingdoms. And this is why the Jews, they understand this, and they're looking forward to that restoration of that kind of kingdom again on the earth. And then Yeshua came, and then we had what they call now the days of Messiah, which always really struck me. I'm like, if the Jews don't believe in Messiah, why are they calling it the days of Messiah? Okay, well, now I understand. But so if that is true, that there was this last 2,000 years that was prophetically going to be called the days of the Messiah, and there were some specific things, prophecies that had to happen and things that were going to go on during that time, okay? And I think that this is all mixed in with part of the revelation that Paul got. He was the one that Yeshua kind of gave the download to, who got the ball rolling to understand that we're going after the Gentiles now. Okay, this is big now. And again, who are the Gentiles and why is this important? See, the part of my whole thing is you'll never really understand all of Bible history, put this whole thing together. There's some huge revelations that you need to get and understand and put into your theological mix. That'll make everything make sense. You have to understand the serpent seed. You have to understand the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, what that means, how that's played out through history, who the wicked are, who the righteous are, and then who everybody in the middle is. Because, okay, then you have to understand the two houses of Israel, how the righteous, the sons of Adam, the righteous got kind of divided into two camps, and we are in the 2,000 years was many times is about going after the people that were in that camp, the house of Israel, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Okay, and I got tons of teachers on this. This is a lot of people have unpacking that. Gentile Christian, you are not a Gentile anymore, and you are not a Christian. Those are like bad words to describe what's going on. You are a lost sheep coming back into the fold, back into covenant relationship with your creator, Yahweh God, through his son, Yahushua HaMashiach, who paid the price, who did actually become a sacrificial lamb, so to speak, for all of us to enter back into covenant relationship, because our covenant with Yahweh at Mount Sinai was broken when we were dispersed from the land. Now, that's a whole piece of the story. But when you get into Yeshua's time, he is, and I've done teachings on this too. This is another kind. You have to understand, there's two comings of Yeshua. This is something people understand, right? He came the first time. as this, they call him the suffering servant. He came as Messiah ben Joseph. He came as the Lamb of God. He came and fulfilled very specific archetypal. This is when he says he fulfilled the law. He didn't do away with the law. This is when we'll get into the law. He just fulfilled his part as being this Messiah, this salvation, this person who would take upon this mantle and who would perform to the T the prophecies of the Messiah ben Joseph and what that meant, and then what that would do. And that was like, once that was done and in the bag, 3 days in the grave, and that was it. Boom. We got a whole new ball game going here, a whole new ball game. So timing, like I said, is everything, and understanding these things. So as I said, in Acts 3:21, there's a verse that says that Yeshua has gone up to heaven, basically, until the time of the restitution or the restoration of all things. Okay, now that's a very Hebraic concept, because this is talking about until the fulfillment of all things. Is all prophecies, okay? Every age and cycle of putting this whole salvation package back together. So they understood that. So the word in Acts is a restoration, a restitution, or a reestablishment of, the plant of righteousness that's been growing. At the beginning of the millennium, or there's going to be a certain time where there will be a particular season, and at that point, all things will be fulfilled, and we are going to go into a new age. And that's where we are. We are at the point of the restitution of all things. And that's why the elect people, there are everyone, if you're paying attention to the spirit that's being poured out, you'll begin to understand that there's all these paradigm shifts going on. People that are all different places of revelation in this thing. And it's fine. We just have to, again, it's always, and it was the same way in the first church. I mean, this blew these people, when I try to explain what was going on with Paul, with the law, and how it was transitioning over to, into how it was going to transition and what it was going to look like in the Gentile camp. I don't think, Halakha Jews or you see some of the hardcore were able to deal with it very well. Okay, there was a lot of people that were like, it was a little too shocking. Okay, but be that as it may. So this time of the restoration of all things is really important. And it also is in Deuteronomy. I had some more verses on this. Because this is another way saying we're at the time of the Gentiles. Paul said there would be this season, but we're at the end of it. That's why we're at the end of it. The Gentiles, the whole world has pretty much gotten a gospel message of this Yahushua HaMashiach. Even Wycliffe Bible translators will tell you there's almost no people group left on the planet. You don't have to have a Bible in your language. You have to just hear. And I did the whole teaching last week, and I hope you'll go back and visit if you haven't, on the oral Torah. Hearing is actually a much more superior, when you really hear, mode of communication with Yah. All right? So if they hear, hear, O Israel. So let me stop with that and say that it is because we entered into a new paradigm shift. There was a new prophetic cycle that was starting with a new people group on the planet, and the finishing off really of another. Okay, so let me just explain that. So you really in the verbiage of the New Testament, you sort of have three people groups. You have the house of Judah, you have the house of Ephraim, you have Jew, you have Gentile, and you have Church of God. Okay, but those again, what you have is the house of Judah. You have a Torah observant group of people on the planet, and they're all over. They weren't just all in Israel. This is the thing. Jews have been all over the world from time immemorial. Okay, you have Torah observant, messianic expectant Torah people. You had what was called the lost sheep. Okay, now this is where it starts to get, you have the 10 tribes that were dispersed into the nations, and people should read Hosea. The whole is talks to the house of Israel and says, you know what, this is what's going to happen to you. You are going to be so dispersed. You are going to so lose your identity. You are going to get so mixed in with the Gentiles that you're really going to be called Gentiles. Even though you're my people, you know, you really are Israelites. You're going to totally lose the identity, and people are going to lose it. You're just going to be considered a Gentile. Okay. So these are the lost sheep that Yeshua came for. Okay. But there's a third category, and these people are more called Gentiles. This is a mixed multitude. Okay. And this gets back to Abraham. Again, this was another big covenant shift where Abraham got established a covenant with Abraham. Said Abraham, through your seed, now it's going to be your seed and your sons, Isaac and Jacob, and the 12, this whole line, that I am going to reestablish my people on the earth. Because again, you got to understand serpent seed. You got to understand this is the shot. We don't all originate from the same father. What can I say? That's why that father, you are of your father, the devil. I mean, Yeshua wasn't confused when you understand this. There are people that have different sources of origination. Okay. Now and this is why studying this stuff deeply, and I'll say this again at this point, has driven me into Jewish mysticism or Kabbalah, because it's the only place that you're going to find, because this is where they have it, the sod level, the mystery level of understanding, where you're going to try to unpack and even explain to somebody what I was just talking about. Okay? Because again, these are concepts that you just don't learn in the grammar, in the Sunday school stuff. Okay? You have to seek, if you're interested in answers to the super deep questions, yeah, it's there, but you have to, seek it out, and you have to do it. But then I've had had a lot of talks on that. So anyways, let's get back to this. I want to start with this concept of what is the law, because this is one of the big contentions with Paul. Was he preaching a false gospel that was taking people away from the law, denigrating the law, which is holy? Okay, but first we have to define really what the law is and what is going on. So I want to say that let's just start with the law. And this was one of the verses that is one of my banner verses. I don't know at this point if I should stop and say this, okay? Well, I'll just wait a little bit longer. But there are the 10 commandments. Okay, there is, like anything I always talk about, there's exoteric and there's esoteric. There is knowledge, there's understanding, there are laws that are for everybody. Okay? Saint, sinner, lost sheep, whatever you are, there are laws of God that are for everybody. Then there are some more developed laws for certain groups of his, those more in covenant with him, or there are more developed laws. Okay, so let me explain this. The Noahide laws, and I'll tell you, we're in a propaganda war because it took me years. Most people don't even have an understanding of really what are the Noahide laws. Oh, it's a word you've heard, but this is something that's been really buried. Okay, see, the Luciferians, that's what I like to call those who are originating from another source. They do not like law. They do not. This is the whole point. They are a law unto themselves. This is the whole point. This is what it means to be a God. In other words, I get to call the shots. I am my own I have a creator, and he has actually instituted how this thing is supposed to run smoothly, and I will. Okay. The 10 commandments are really, they're not the law, they're not Moses' laws. These are not the laws of Moshe. These are the laws of God. These 10 commandments, they are spiritual laws. They are as real as the laws of gravity and inertia, thermodynamics, and anything else. They work in the category of the psyche of the soul. This is the thing. If you break these, you will get repercussions. You will get consequences, as much as if you put your hand on a hot stove, you're going to burn it. If you break one of Yahweh's commandments that operate in your soul and in your mind, or even in your body, you are going to receive a consequence. Okay? This is the way the system is wired. But the Noahide laws have always been around. They used to be, you could even say these were the Enochian laws. Back with Adam. Adam taught his children. Okay, why did Cain know it was that he had committed fratricide when he murdered his brother? If there weren't this is something we have to do. God has always had laws. He has always, I mean, that's why did Eve know, not to eat, quote unquote, the apple. That's very pictorial, but through the allegorical language for carnal relations, whatever. But how did she know that? Unless she knew there were certain do's and don'ts in this thing. Okay. So the Noahide laws have always been there. All the peoples on the planet have been expected by God to keep these 10 basic, and I'm not going to, was it 7? Was it 8? Was it 10? Did it include the first 2? That's another whole show. But the point is that the Noahide laws, and you can study them out. Every culture, this is why, there's like, everybody's got a golden rule and everybody's got, some of these commandments. Yes, because this was known to the people that this is how God expected his righteousness to reign on the earth. Okay, he didn't expect it to be total chaos or anarchy. People are going to populate all kinds of people, and he expected them to observe. And this is the other thing, the law of God, these are big categories. They're not just, thou shalt not kill. There's a lot, and this is what the Jews have become famous for, is parsing. There's about 1 million different nuances to that. I mean, every situation that you're in that could result in the death of, there's a nuance there. Okay, this is why I've said you have loss of manslaughter, you have premeditated, you have accidental. There's a lot of different ways that this thing could play out. But the point is that these are spiritual laws instituted by God. They have, doesn't matter, it will bring cursing and blessing depending on how you have an attitude to this. This is what makes a righteous Gentile. This is one of the big issues. Any Adamite has inside of himself this kind of honing device, it's called your conscience. It's a kind of an understanding. This was what goes on with us in our dialogue, between, the good angel, the bad, like, should I or shouldn't I? Ooh, if I do it or not, we are wired. That's what makes us human. That's what our connection to God in the image is, that we have volition. So we can think about our actions and choices, and we can decide to do them or not decide to do them. Out of the heart come the issues of life. So the law of Moses, though, was a whole different, okay? Now, wait, let me just say this. I want to get back to this, talking about the law. There's 2 verses we have to cover, because this is what, oh my gosh. So you got 10 Noahide laws, right? But it's not that simple. Abraham was in, where is this verse? In Genesis 26:5. Now, Abraham, like I said, he's a pivotal character. God established a major covenant with him. And it was because Isaac is relating about his father, and Isaac says, look, Abraham, my father, kept and obeyed the Lord Yahweh's commandments, laws, precepts, and decrees. All right? Now, I want to talk about this word in different translations, but basically it's a word, it's the word Strong's 8085, it's the Shama. It's the word here. Because if we can just even get an understanding of this word, we can put a lot of this argument to bed right away. Because it is a word, there are 2 parts to this word. It doesn't mean you hear. This is the point. From God's point of view, let me put it this way. When you hear, that's why in some of the translations is because Abraham kept and obeyed. You hear, but in your hearing, in your action, you obey. That is what is inherent in that word. That throws all, Toralist grace out the window. If you hear God, you obey God. Otherwise, you didn't do it right. That's just it. That is absolutely implicit in the word, because the first usage of this word, it's really funny. So it means to hear and to obey. This is the whole concept of what it means to be a hearer of the word, but not a doer. I'll show you my faith that I hear by my works, or, you're going to show your works and no faith. These things have to work together. This has always been the principle, and that's why Abraham he didn't just give God lip service, he obeyed. Okay? So that's one of those preachy things I would say. There is no Toralist concepts with God. That is Luciferian. Okay? So if you can't handle that, what can I say? The first usage is in the garden where Adam and Eve, they're walking, they just eat the apple, right? And they're kind of freaked, and they hear God coming, and they heard God in the garden. coming. Okay, now again, that's allegorical language, whatever, I'm not going to unpack it. But the point is why they felt shame, because immediately and then they covered themselves. Because, see, they had heard God's word. They knew kind of what but they didn't obey. This is the first instance where iniquity entered, because they knew the laws of God. They knew the and I won't go into this in the depth, but they didn't obey. They ate of the apple. Okay, he did whatever. Okay, listen, but the point is, they felt shame because they knew they had heard. They knew it, but they did not obey it. So this is implicit in the Shema. Okay, that word. So Abraham kept and obeyed, heard God's commandments, laws, precepts, and decrees. Now, those are three really big words. So you can't just say, and that's this is what I'm getting to say. There's always been a development of law. This is what I say. There might be 10 commandments, but one of the things with the Noahide laws, God did tell them, and I think this is in Jasher. It's very Jubilee spelled out explicitly. He told them that they were supposed to set up, everybody, courts and systems to bring righteous judgment. All right. They were, there's no lawlessness in the land. And if you were a chronic lawbreaker, or you weren't playing by the rules or something, you were creating great distress, you were to have laws, civil laws, and civil courts to deal with these issues. So there always has been huge bodies, but I'm talking of laws, of breaking this thing down. So let me get back here to the Psalm 19 to say this whole thing again. There is in Psalm 19, 7 through 9, it talks about, here, I'll read it. In Psalm 19, 7, the law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the law. So I want you to see these words. We have law. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy. We have statutes. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. And the fear of the Lord is pure. And then last was the ordinance of the Lord are altogether righteous. Okay, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different words. This is what I mean, that come under this category. The first one, Strong's 845, is Torah. Okay, Torah, people think is always just the first 5 books of Moses. No, that is when it is used as a noun. There's a time when Torah is a noun, and it does refer to the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what it means in its generic sense. It means teachings and instructions. Torah is, and it has become sort of the overarching word. But then you get into other words here. We were talking about one called the testimonies. The second one here, we'll go from here, is the statutes, which is sometimes translated the testimonies, the ordinances, the admonitions, the decrees, the rules. Everything has a nuance, has a more parceled out, more, fine-tuned concept to it. Then you go into the next one, which is the precepts, which is a word 6490 Strong's, and it means the mandates, the statutes, the precepts, again. But these are all different words. They're not really saying the same thing. This is what we have to understand. This is a very, this is why, and I've said the Essenes, this is why we're coming to understand this people group on the planet, and where the priests and the Levites and these people that were in charge of these holy things, they would have to almost dedicate their life to it. Torah study, the people, these are huge areas, okay? Then you go into the next word, which is the commands. This is the word 4687. It's the word mitzvah, okay? These are mitzvahs, these are commandments. This is another whole category. Another word is, the next one is 4941. Let's see. Which is ordinances, again, which means justice, which is his requirements, his mitzvahs. Okay, so I wanted to get to that. This is a big category of things. Okay, but to think that if Abraham had these, and we know that Moses had a lot of these, it's impossible to really believe and extrapolate again that they're not around for the Gentiles. They didn't disappear. God does not change. So I think it's our attitude towards it that is in error, not the law itself or what it's meant to accomplish and do. So, but when you get into the law of Moses and Psalm 19 again, and these words are used over and over again in Job 38, in Psalm 19, and Jeremiah 33, where they're, reiterated this. But in the law of Moses, see, and this is what we're getting closer and closer to the time of Yeshua and an understanding of law. Because, see, I said, if you don't understand the concept of law, and when they start throwing this word around, because Yeshua's throwing around, or you transgress the laws of my father, with your laws of tradition, what is he talking about? Or, Paul saying we're not under the law. What you just can't be stupid and just assume okay? These are huge philosophical, theological, packed concepts. And if we're ever going to get to the truth, if you want to get to the truth, you've really got to kind of get a bigger and better, deeper handle on this stuff. But anyways, by the time you get to law of Moses, all sorts of new things were instituted because you had the ark. You had so much more, like a whole kick up, so to speak. Instead of a righteous remnant, you're going to have a whole nation of people. And then you're going to have actually full-time paid, priests and Levites who are going to do these things. It's a much more, just visible. Number one, visible, important, what the covenant these people were taking on to be a witness to the whole earth now, to be a nation, a kingdom of priests and kings before the whole world. This was some pretty heavy duty stuff. But Moses instituted a whole bunch of new laws, which were the ritualistic laws and the ceremonial laws. These things had to do with the ark that then morphed into the temple. You had a lot of these matters of food and drink. He gave them a lot more, actually, to keep them at a much higher level. And see, this is the things we don't understand. Why you shouldn't eat meat sacrificed to idols. It took me years to figure out what they meant. I'm just being honest. Anybody who thinks that took me years to figure out what that was referring to. But there you have ritualistic laws, ceremonial laws, you have food laws, you have all these different things. And so by the time you get to Yeshua, there is quite a lot going on. And then you have all these different rabbinic schools. You got the school of Hillel and the whole school. You got the Pharisees. You've got Sadducees. You have this Essene group. So there is a lot going on, and you can't just be glib about it. But it is not the law that is. And the point is, it is not the law that was ever at fault. But it is it is that how we either do the law or don't do the law that is the problem. Okay, so then that is called sin. That is either you do the law or you don't do the law. So you either sin or you don't sin. You're either righteous, meaning you have upheld the statutes, or you have not. The laws given to the Noah were for everybody, like I have said this, including the Gentiles and the in this, okay, I've said this, there are consequences, there's the physics of this. Every action produces an opposite reaction. And this is another thing that that Kabbalah study, Jewish Kabbalah, has really helped me to understand are the physics, the laws, the spirit, how to understand the spiritual laws on a much really deeper level and to work with. See, a lot of these, especially a lot of the stuff that Moses in the oral Torah, people don't understand. They didn't understand unless you had the interpretation of why you were doing what you were doing. And the other thing is a lot of these things, they just I'll get to this second point. I have to make another point. Now, so we're almost down there to the time of Yeshua. He comes to his own don't really know him. There are those, though, that are prepared. Basically, the apostles, the 120, there was a believing remnant, the Essenes, and this is the truth. There were Pharisees that came out and joined this camp. There were, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, the Sadducees, I suppose. Plenty of the people of the land. Now, let me say this other thing. You know, we throw around your Sadducee, your Pharisee, your, see, those are, yeah, different people groups, but there's tons of everybody else. Just like today, we have, you know, our paid clergy out there. We've got different groups, but there's a whole bunch of secular people out there that aren't really bad people and aren't necessarily breaking the law, quote unquote. They're just, these are what are called the people of the land. Okay. Well, I could say a lot more about that, but I probably should just stop with that. So there are laws that are for all peoples at all times. Nothing's changed today. We are still under the Noahide laws. We have always been under the Noahide laws, okay? Now, Jesus did not come to destroy the law. This is the misnomer, because he is the law. He is the logos. I mean, a lot of this stuff, you can't separate. When you understand him, especially in conversation, you know, the laws of the universe, he didn't stop the laws of the universe. Okay, like I said, that the 10 commands are like 10 spiritual laws. They still operate. He didn't stop them. They're still going on. Okay, but what he did do was he fulfilled. He was this concept. This is, you know, we throw around these Christianese words. He was a payment. He was a propitiation. He was the lamb. He was the sacrifice. He was the acquittal. Okay, he fulfilled a part where he was able to, and this gets into really deep stuff in the physics of the whole thing, his blood, his soul life, his body, when he willfully laid down his life, you know, for his friends, which was, you know, the human race, he changed the laws. The spiritual laws were in place at that time. That's, I guess, the best way I can say it. He actually was able to, like, if there's a dam and, you know, you plug it, he was able to, like, and he not even stop it and even cover it. It's just like he says, he was able to cancel. He was able to nullify a portion of the consequences for these laws. Now, all right, let me just see. This is getting how I can just try to explain this. Okay. Okay. Before I go there, there's a couple verses, just in case, you know, to just this idea that we have to keep the law, but we have to understand Rashi. Okay, so let me just try to go back here to finish fleshing out the law and what we're responsible for. Paul said, let every man remain in the calling wherein he has been called. This is important because, you know, I'm technically what's called as a Gentile. When I get a little more understanding, I realize I really am a lost sheep. I am of an Israelite background, lost sheep. Okay, so I'm getting closer to this thing. So I really am in covenant relationship. So yes, I am, according to the cosmic covenant, I am responsible to know and understand, and to the best of my ability, work in harmony and agreement with the laws of Yah. Okay? But if you don't think so, in Revelation, I'm just going to go through the verses that really do say this. Okay? If we would just listen with ears, Shema, hear, with an intent to obey, not with the intent to try to wiggle out of it. Blessed are they who do his commandments, that they might have the right to eat of the tree of life and enter in through the gates into the city. Revelation 22:14. Blessed who keep his commandments. 1 John 2:4, he that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. John 15:10, if you keep my commandments, you shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his law. That's why Jesus kept all of the law. 1 John 5:3 says, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. Now, it says in 1 John that those, you know, if you love me, you will obey me. This is the whole, the Gospel of James is the point. And Paul did not preach against this at all. He fully expected, he taught it, Torah-based lifestyle. There's nothing in his teachings that are not consistent with righteous living and Torah-based lifestyles outside. This is what I say. This is where the rub is, because in God's foresight, because God's always way ahead of us, and we're always trying to do catch up, I swear. He knew that the temple was going to be destroyed. Okay, Herod's temple. He knew that in Yeshua knew. I mean, this is the whole point where he is in the Garden of Gethsemane in the pain of it. He just knew what was coming down the pike. Very painful things. He knew that the 70 AD Israel was going to finally be defeated as a nation group on the planet, period. That's it. And they were going to go into 100% dispersion. And now both houses were going to be in complete exile in the earth for 2,000 years. Okay, until what did we have in 1948, right? Or we had the start of this. So we're in a new season. Things are getting ready to change. Okay. So Rashi, who's one of the greatest Bible or the sages, and most Jews will use his commentaries on the Tanakh, bar none. He is probably the greatest Bible commentator that they follow on a regular basis. Rashi will tell you right from the 30 to 40% of the laws in the Torah, the ceremonial, that you can't keep today because we don't have a temple. I mean, that's from a Jewish, rabbi, okay? And that explains a lot of, this whole concept of rabbinic Judaism, because if they don't have the temple, how do you reinterpret this whole thing, okay? It can get very complicated. People have made it complicated, but so we have to understand, this is the point. You have to stick close to the house. I always say you have to try to understand these things from a lot of different perspectives. But if you don't have a temple, you can't do ceremonial, ritualistic laws. I have to get something here. What do you do with the law? How do you interpret it? And this gets into the whole kind of, I think, the revelation that Paul saw and understood. And so you have this whole new huge influx of people on the planet called the Gentiles, who are now going to be allowed to come into covenant relationship with the God of Israel and with the people of Israel, which at this point in time, seriously, and this is my one rub, Jude at this time, I think they have been in survivalist mode. This mindset, I think, is still there today. Survivalist mode for so long. It's really all about them and whatever. The rest of us, can sink or swim. This is the point. They had lost the empathy, and I think this is one of the things that Yeshua was saying. You don't understand. You got 10 of your brothers and all of their offspring out there in the world. Don't you care? How are they going to get back home? This is the story of the prodigal son. How are they going to get back home? Unless somebody goes to them, unless somebody makes a way for them to get back home. Okay. And then that includes the lost sheep, because what had happened was the Gentiles, being a people group, I'm not going to pay on their own. That's a whole category of people in the Bible. I'm not going to get there. But the lost sheep had so intermingled and intermarried and interfaced and interplanted themselves with the Gentiles, so that they were one and the same. So if you're going to go after the lost sheep, you might as well go after the Gentiles too, because there's no way to tell them apart anymore. All right. So this is in Yah's foreknowledge. He knew that. And he knew that a lot of the Gentiles, this is what was the gospel. This is the gospel. It's good news. It's not the Torah. We're not talking about the law. And I'm going to show you that the gospel is not the law. They're not the same thing. The gospel, and Peter got the gospel, James got the gospel, they all got the gospel, and they all preached the same gospel. And they preached it according to the people that they were sent to. Paul made no bones about it. At the latter part of his ministry, he knew this. He was going to go to the Gentiles, okay? He knew it was going to be highly offensive to his brethren. He had to actually this is what I think is a lot of the in the literature, he had to make a clean break. He was considered a heretic. He was considered a traitor. He was considered a spouter of lies. He was considered and you know, he knew it. And what are you going to do? I mean, what are you going to do? God told you to do something. What are you going to do? All right. That's why he said, I'm a prisoner. I can't not do it. This is what I got to do. All right. And it was so bold, and it was just, and the way they came in, his terms for allowing these Gentiles to come into the fold was a little more, well, and we know this. This is the tricky part. It was probably, and maybe he did go a little more liberal on it. Maybe he did. Okay, nobody's perfect. But he did have the right hand of blessing. I believe this from James and Peter and John. And I do believe they worked in harmony with this. And it says right in Galatians that Peter preached the gospel to the Jews. That's who he was. And Paul was preaching the gospel, the good news, to the Gentiles. And many of the apostles went off into people groups out there. You know, who was it that went? Thomas went to India, they went to Africa, they went all over, and it was a huge explosion of reaching the lost sheep and the Gentiles. And they really did have the same message, that there's some good news just happened, okay? A way home has been made, okay? And that is what is called grace. And you can come into this thing by faith. But once you get in, the requirements don't change. God is still a holy God. And if you love him, you will keep his commandments. This is the thing that got the disconnect. And this is what Paul knew was going to happen. It was prophesied. He said, there's going to be full of doctrines of demons. I mean, he knew these are pagan. I mean, didn't take long, 150, 200 years by 300. Plus you have you've just got Hasatan and his minions working overtime. So, I mean, there is a lot. But you know what? The beauty of it is we're here. There's a whole elect in the earth. God didn't lose the battle. Oh my gosh, saying don't lose heart at all for a minute. Just get, in my opinion, let's get the bigger picture instead of devouring one another. I mean, because the whole tactic of the enemy with the Paul thing, he wants to divide and conquer hugely. This is get us into two camps, Paul haters and those who don't, and argue and put on a whole display of really untorah-like behavior, and make a line in the sand. This is a psyop from Hasatan. This is a divide and conquer tactic of the serpent. We shouldn't be ignorant of his devices. This thing can be understood. It can be mediated, and it can be looked at in hindsight, and is a really, in my opinion, it's a brilliant strategy plan, because God did exactly what he said he was going to do. And it's done. Boom. And now we're ready. He's looking at the elect of the age. You want to be a king? You want to be a priest in the next millennium? I don't know. I mean, I just want to get into one of those Torah schools. This is my new thing. Oh my gosh. There's just so much to learn and understand. I just want to get into a good Torah school in the millennium. But anyways, so I had a couple more points I want to say. So the real rub at the time of Yeshua, because see, he is a savior, and this is how he became a savior for the whole earth, the good shepherd, because the people, there's so many more of the elect that were scattered all over the earth. This is the point that he said to Abraham, your seed will be like the sand of the sea and the stars all over the place. You understand how geographically hunkered down Jerusalem was, and they were, that final last generation of people that were still in the land. And there were tons of them already dispersed all over the earth. And then there were tons that through thousands of years had been dispersed and who had lost their identity. Okay, so this is something we just have to understand. Now, let me get back to my point, because this is the thing. The law is something that can be, and this was what God was always fighting with his people about. It can be done on two levels. This was always the rub. It can denegate into ritualistic, formalistic, repetitive, repetition of rituals and creeds, fixed forms, the letter of the law, how you behave in the house of worship, and that's it. It can have no ability when you make it just a fixed outward expression ritual, when you make it religion without any work with the inner man, if you don't engage the inner man, because it's the inner man that needs to be reformed or to be brought into line or to do Torah, because it's out of the heart, it's out of our inner man. If you don't translate, or if you don't use the weightier issues of the law, what it's all about, which is to bring justice and mercy and that's why justice and mercy and an equitable system, whether financially, how you treat each other, government, how you govern, all these things. If it's not done if the law is not practiced with a level of understanding that it is transformative, it is supposed to be transformative to you, your family, your community, then you miss the boat. And what's the point? So you're just wearing me with your stupid rituals and your constant sacrifices, and it's that we're not getting anywhere in this thing. You're not being any more of a light to the nations than okay, so this has always been an issue, and it's still an issue in the church age. The whole point is that there is the inner. This is where the point. Then this was the brilliant point that Yeshua was able to do by his, laying down his life, his death, his resurrection, the whole point, putting the blood on the mercy seat in heaven, opening up the physics again so that we could have a direct channel to God, that everyone could go and kind of plug into the source, literally, and that we could receive spiritual renewal and transformation from the inside out. This is the concept of the circumcision of the heart. Okay, this is what the Ruach, he said, for the elect of the last days, okay, which is the people group that's coming out of all the different camps. So in the elect for the last 2,000 years, the people that are coming out of the camp of the Gentiles, the camp of the lost sheep, or the camp of the Jews who are coming into this thing, if you will have trust in this Messiah and his finished work, and receive it by faith. This is the thing, you got to believe. The righteous shall live by faith. Faith is a physics. Without faith, it's impossible to believe God. If you don't believe that the chair is going to hold you when you sit in it, what's the point? We have to understand the whole concept of what faith is. It's a level of trust. If God said it, that this Messiah will be able to cause us to operate at a level of a circumcision of our heart, of a level where we can get right to the heart of the matter, where we can live Torah from our heart. See, this is what people don't understand, because it's a higher level of functioning. I don't need, and there's nothing wrong with beautiful liturgy or creeds. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than practicing, and I've had these experiences, your forms of worship with full cognitive understanding, so that not only is your body in tune, your mind is in tune, your heart's in tune, you are communing body, soul, and spirit. There's nothing more. Those are the mountains. Those are the spiritual ecstasy, kind of experiences, that we all long to have all the time. But what I'm trying to say is, because of the way it was going to play out, where, there wasn't going to be a temple. There weren't going to be the priests and the Levites, except in the camps that they found amongst themselves, there wasn't going to be functioning in the earth. The sheep were going to be lost. It was going to take, and Yeshua said, I can do it. I cry sometimes when I think this, because we've lost. This was the new birth. He will get you, saint, where you need to go, where you need to be, how you're transferred, so you can be a light. Okay, and this is a people. This is where he said, I can take these people, and this gives God glory. I can take these people out of the Gentiles. I can take these people no matter where, and if they'll just plug into me, I can get them to shine like lights in the firmament. I'm sorry, because it's physics. It works. It can happen. People who have learned how to become Torahs, had to work with God. This is the point. You can get to the place, John said, where you can cease from willful sin. I'm telling you, Satan, it is absolutely possible. It is possible Don't let the religionists lie to you. See, this is always, we always have, and I'm not picking on, but I'm telling you, there was a class of Pharisees, then there's always a class of people that want to say, no, you got to do it this way. The rich, okay, no, it is a work of the heart. We're all different. You know, keeping, okay, because I want to say that Paul did not, if you really study, he did not stop Torah observant lifestyles, okay? You know, where he talked about, you know, fornication is wrong, lying is wrong, stealing is wrong. You got to love your neighbor. Everything he said in terms of the higher lifestyle expressions of godliness and uprightness, he covered all the bases. You cannot say, and he told the people. But see, now at the end of the age, we need to come back to, first of all, we need to totally repent that we even could have possibly gotten it wrong. And that grace was because grace, you know, grace is the physics that will help you get the upper hand on that evil inclination. I mean, this is the thing. It'll just kill it. It'll just chop the head off that serpent. I'm telling you what, that's what it's made to do. See, because there will be a people, there's a plan of righteousness growing. There will be a people at the end of the age who will be ready to go into the land of Canaan as his priests. This is the whole point. Okay. And maybe, and you know, maybe you're not going to be a fully up to speed 100% and understanding everything, but I do believe on the day, okay, because this was the last point I have to make. Let me just see where I am here. I haven't bumping my gums. It says in Hosea, which is another, like I said, Hosea should always be read by people who understand the two houses. The promises that he made, the curses that he said was going to come on them, the promises that he made, he has done it. Okay? Now, I haven't called it, there's so many nuances in different ways. There's a lot of stuff still to be said on all this, and I'm not saying that, but I just want to read this out of, going back to time. You got to know where you are on the prophetic timeline, because prophecy is all about its being fulfilled in time and what God is trying to do. He says in many ways and at different times and season, he does different things. But in Hosea 6, verse 1, it says, come, let us return to the Lord. In the whole context of this is Israel. This is the house. Well, I wouldn't even say it's just Israel, because it's not. This is the dispersion. Okay, come, let's return to the Lord. He has torn us to pieces. He has injured us. Now, you know, this is language is saying, you know, this is what it is. The curses will cut you down and divide you asunder. This is the point. A Torahless life in an individual, in a family, in a nation, these things will bring curses. They will bring so much negative. You know, this is the point. It will look like a lion just tore you apart. This is the poetic, allegorical language that they're portraying, okay? But he will bind up our wounds, and this is when, after 2 days, he will revive us, okay? And on the third day, he will restore us so that we may live in his presence. Let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press on to acknowledge him. This is the point. After 2 days, he will revive us. And on the third day, he will. The whole point is, the word revive is the word che. Okay, now this, if you understand this, it'll make everything that Paul said, the whole point of what is available to today, he will give us life. We will have, because, you know, Jesus said this thing, Yeshua said, I lay down my life, but I have power to take it up, because he is the Lord. He is the life. Okay, he has a life source in him. You can't kill him. Okay, he was never dead in the sense. Okay, his body was, yes, his body was so done over, and no more life force could stay in it. Okay, but he will. This is the word che. It's the life force. He, for these 2 days, this is the point. He says, if you are in me, I am in you. I will. It is not I that live, but Christ Jesus who lives in me. Okay, is the life force of the resurrected Yeshua that is actually living. And this is the anointing. This gets into the whole, see, the language people don't understand. If you don't understand the emanations of God, if you don't understand, you know, the Ruach, as I'm not going to go into this, he will revive us. Okay, that's what's been going on amongst the elect, they were dead, you know. This is the point. You were dead, but now you're alive in Christ. Oh my gosh, he is giving you life, a resurrection. But on the third day, he will restore. And that word is the word restore is the word stand up. The standing up, that refers to the resurrection. We will stand up. On the third day, we will arise. We will arose. People who are asleep, you know, you can be in a state, but boy, when you get up, that's it. It's a whole new ballgame. Okay, you have arisen. On the third day, we will arise. We will stand up. And at that point, we will live. The word live is the word chase. We will live eternally in his presence. So again, understanding the timeline, the last 2 days, he has been putting in the living che, okay, the life, the resurrection life, and then they will be part of the army, you know, that will stand up, that will be resurrected at the time of at the beginning of the third day, which kind of is the beginning of the millennium. So I don't know. There's a lot more to say. There's tons more to flesh out on this. I was going to really go into Paul. I have a couple of questions. Yeah, I think Paul threw a lot of the legalistic scenes just nuts. The Pharisees, I mean, his message, this was too much, too soon, too fast, couldn't absorb it. Because, you know, if you love your traditions of it, but there was a people on the planet that could move with him, that had, you know, he said, if no greater love is one who lays on his life for his brother, that understood these 2 days had to happen. We had to go into these people groups. We had to allow Yeshua saving people. We're not doing it. We had to allow him and work with him to go in and take out of the nations those who would come into this and receive this light, this ore. So my only two questions is, there's one other in the research. Paul was quite a person. He had amazing connections, and you know, Dr. Jackson Snyder, if you want to look up some stuff on Jackson Snyder Presents, it's a website, you Google that. Amazing information about Paul, because of hugely able to read the historical records, an amazing historian who has really flushed out a lot of information about this guy. But this is my one question left on all that, because Paul says that he is, you know, at one point he said, I'm a Hebrew of the Hebrews, and I'm a Pharisee. Now, according to some of the genealogies that are available, Paul came from an Idumaean family. He was highly connected to the family, to the Herods. Okay, but this is what I have to still research, because that would be really tricky if he was an Idumaean. I will admit that's a little clink in the storyline, understanding the bloodlines and different things. But if he was, the Herods were always marrying Jewish women as their wives. Okay, and I think that Bernice, if I remember this thing correctly, Bernice was one of the wives of the Herods, and she was Jewish. And if your mother, according to Jewish law, and I looked this up, and it has another really interesting nuance, if the mother was Jewish, the child is considered Jewish, and not just Jewish, that they have a Jewish soul. Now, this is so interesting, because this again gets into the whole thing. Soul, life, nephesh, these are words that are interchangeable. So sometimes the word nephesh is used as soul, but sometimes it's used as life forms. And there's a little bit of a nuance in there, life force. But according to Jesus, if the mother is Jewish, then the child has a Jewish soul, which is really, so if that's true, then Paul was a Jew. And he was, again, a Hebrew of the Hebrews. He could say that quite accurately. So that's something that we're just going to have to find out. And Paul made it very clear that he was only entrusted with the gospel to the uncircumcised. He was preaching a gospel of the good news. Then he wasn't preaching, because I have to say my last thing about this, because there's just too much to go into. He says it right in Galatians 3:8, or where it is, that the law is different from faith. Okay? Faith is just having trust. We're supposed to trust that this Messiah, when Joseph came, can do what he said he was going to do. That's your faith. That gets you in the door, because you can get in the door by that confession, by that understanding that he will do it. But that doesn't mean you are all exempt from Torah. This is where we missed it, okay? And he says this very clearly, and I wish I had this. I had it written down somewhere, and it would take me a few minutes to find it, that he, that the law is different than faith. They're not the same thing. So you come in by faith, but you are still expected to keep the Torah. And as Paul said, he understood this revelation about the Gentiles and the way that Yeshua was going to work with them. He said he got it by a revelation. Now here I'm going to give, if you stayed with me this long, I might as well stay and just give you my two last anecdotes here. See why? Because I don't believe, to be obvious, that Paul was a false apostle. I think he was just trying to do what God told him he had to do, and he was a prisoner about it. He couldn't get out of it, no matter how much it made him look like to his own people or to whatever. He had this the road to Damascus experience, because I had a little exchange on YouTube about this. There are 3 ways that are kind of known that God can and has historically, this is in all the records and all the writings, kind of worked with people. I don't even know if I have this here. There are 3, this is even a little Kabbalistic concept. Anyways, let me tell you, I had this experience one time. Paul was thrown off his horse. He had, and saw a bright shining light, okay? And there's a question about, well, what was that all about? Did he or didn't he? And was that some kind of demonic manifestation? Whatever. But I want to tell you something. I had a similar experience with the bright light kind of thing. And see, a truly spiritual experience, that's what kind of makes me a little bit of a mystic, because once you have some of these really deep spiritual experiences, it's like this world becomes strangely dim. Man, I know there's other worlds. I know there's, because, when you've had sort of these experiences, it's like, okay, I know we're not in Kansas. Never been in Kansas, okay. But Yaakov uses 3 modes of communication. He formed, like I talked about, the spiritual laws, there is sound, there is light, and there is text. I don't get rid of it. These are called the 3 sephers. There's 3 books. These are the 3 texts, the 3 modes of communication. In the beginning, he spoke, there was light, and something else. The 3 modes are like in the first 2 verses in Genesis, okay? Many people hear God speak to them. Sound. Many people see God, see something. Okay, something in the spirit. Many people, it's through text. Okay, it's you're going to be reading something, and it's a revelation that comes out of the pages. Okay, these are just 3 absolutely known ways in which God has historically communicated with a lot of people. That's a fact. I didn't make that up. So one day I had an experience where one of the first things that ever happened to me when I was really beginning my Christian journey, quote unquote, I was a Christian. The first way I came in, it was a beautiful sunny day, and it was probably 12 o'clock at noon, and it was 1 o'clock. It was sunny. It was beautiful. I was in my room. I was reading my Bible. I had just gone through this kind of well, I won't even give you the first part, but I was in a holy place. I thought I was pretty good in the sense of just submitting myself in his presence, trying to read his word. And all of a sudden, my room at the time was eggshell white, that total apartment color, everything. It's eggshell white. So it's a white wall, and there's really not much, there's no ornamentation on the wall. And I'm sitting looking this way, and out of the corner of my, on the wall over here, I start to see light. And I start to and it's catching my attention, and I'm like, okay, and I want to turn my head fully because it's a little weird now. There's a light, and out of my wall is emanating this light, and I'm like, and then I look, and it's like there's like this about a yard of light coming out of the wall, encompassing the wall, and it's just this light. It is not it is a heavenly light. That's all I can tell you. And this is the thing. The light that's in the room with the sunlight in it was so dirty. I felt like I was all of a sudden in this dirtiest room, compared to the light that was emanating in this light. It made the daylight, this brilliant sunny daylight, look like the dirtiest light you could possibly imagine. So the contrast was really amazing. And then I'm like, this is, and then I was starting to have, you know, physical, like this light was sort of like electrical shocks, like going through my whole body. I mean, this was an extremely mystical experience. It happened. It was real. I was awake. But this light was communicating with me. I mean, I don't know what to tell you people, whatever. But all of a sudden in the light, as I'm looking, there was these three shapes sort of started to formulate. Like, I don't know, the light coalesced, became a little more solid, isn't even the right word because we're talking light. And a dove flew through it, like a shape of like a dove. I mean, there was just sort of this pictograph thing going on. And I was like, oh. And I was really at this point was like pretty much like, okay, I'm toasted, whatever that was. I wasn't on drugs. I'm telling you what, people, this was. And, you know, it went away and I was there and I was like, well, that was, and I looked down at my Bible again, and the very verse I read right then was, and Paul saw a great and shining light. I had to go, okay, whatever, coincidence, whatever. But see, this is the thing. I do believe that that was my baptism in the Ruach. I mean, that's what I believe. I was baptized in the Spirit that way because I had water baptized Spirit, and my life changed radically. That was just such an infusion of light and love. It just changed me forever. And I didn't know what it was, and I hid it, and I didn't tell many people, and I kind of hid it because in those days with my, I was like, who do I tell? And when you're in a, you know, like kind of Baptist church where nothing supernatural happens and don't, you know. So, but it's only been until these later years that I've really been able to understand, and especially understanding Kabbalah now and understanding the emanations and the triads and how they operate. I'm like, okay, this is making sense to me. So I just want to tell you that. So maybe that's why I have a personal thing about Paul. So we'll throw that in. Maybe I can't look at him objectively because of that experience. Okay, I'll throw that out there. The next thing I want to tell you is what a revelation is, because Paul said he got this gospel by revelation. And this is something else that unless you have experienced receiving something by revelation, you can't explain it. But he said, no man taught me. I didn't teach it to myself. Didn't come down from the tradition of my elders. I received it by revelation of Yeshua. And this happened to me too. And a lot of people, when you, this was sort of began this whole journey in my life about 7 years ago. I sat down at one day in the morning, and I was just at a place, and I said, all right, look, I had a verse. I had a life verse, so to speak. And I was like, okay, this verse, this word means something to me, God. And I finally just said, I have no clue what it means. I just, how do I begin to try to figure out if there's a relationship between this for me and what you want? So I said, all right, well, we're just going to try to unpack it. I knew a little bit about Bible research and stuff. And I sat down at my computer, and within an hour, I was in a different dimension. And by the end of that day, which about 14 hours of straight, flat out, I think I just got up to get a cup of coffee, do Bible research, I received a revelation. And I will tell you, God, you see, isn't like you said on library, through deep Bible research, having no man teach me, but just letting God, figuring out how the Spirit can lead you into truth. I got a revelation. Now, revelation, this is the other thing, it doesn't mean that nobody's ever known it before. It's new to you. Okay, he's going to reveal something to you personally. And yes, and this is where you do need to go out and see why you're the only person on the planet that, you know, and Paul can understand what his revelation, it was pretty documented it was totally documented in the prophets. And what I saw, he showed me the two houses that day. Okay, this is the thing that's changed my life, where I saw by revelation, because I had never even heard of the two. It wasn't on my radar as a Christian for 30 years. Never, ever, ever even heard a whisper or a breath of anything about that I could be in anything other than the Gentile Christian church could be, you know, the Israel of God. So when I got up that day and I realized he taught me, the Spirit taught me that whole revelation. So these are real things, and we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So basically that's what I want to say about Paul. And whatever, let's have some dialogue. Let's have respectful dialogue. You know, you don't have to agree with me, whatever, but, you know, I do think in the house, we want to get to the same place, and we want to get there intact. So on that note, I'm going to say good night. Shalom.